Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, where we usually talk about a little bit of unusual activity, which means somebody might have been tipped off. Today, we've got 3 of the 4 stocks with unusual activity. We're going to break it down for you, give you the 411 on what you need to know about trading today, the 26th of June. Bang! On the Rebel's Edge. Wow, a lot of unusual paying off bigly, Pete.
Bigly, eh?
Bigly, B-I-G-L-Y. It's technically a word now. It's in the dictionary.
I like it. I like it. And we've seen a lot of it. We've seen a lot of unusual option activity for a long, long time. But I can say this with absolute strength behind me from all the people talking about it. The last couple of weeks, maybe last month or so, has been some of the most incredible that folks have ever seen.
Yeah.
And it's in every category you can name, from what people would view as boring to really exciting to you name it. The UOA has been absolutely incredible, John.
Yeah, it has, and it's been lifting a lot of stocks. And when a stock goes up 4 to 10%, which we've had a bunch of those, you can imagine, folks, the at-the-money calls that Pete and I are buying, or the at-the-money puts, react bigly.
Said it again.
To those moves. All right, let's start off with the macro minute, Pete. The Federal Reserve continues, as Pete said yesterday, signaling higher for longer, not lower, higher for longer. Now, they're going to be weighing in when the pivot finally comes, if the pivot comes, Pete. And that's a potential wild card, along with, of course, the debate tomorrow night.
Yeah, we're in for some pretty interesting days over the next couple, John. I mean, the debate is absolutely something that is intriguing, to say the least, and probably going to be something that will wake up a lot of people, I would think. And secondly, as far as the markets are concerned, PCE is a big deal. The Fed has told us it's a big deal. It's their favorite data gauge. And so that comes Friday. So we've got ourselves plenty for people to prepare for over the next couple of days. It's going to be interesting. And I think it'll be very telling as we've kind of gone through earnings season, although we're almost ready to kick it off again in not too many weeks. So it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yep. Well, folks, we always follow up the macro minute with fantastic futures. And fantastic futures, Pete, I was torn between Bitcoin, but it's only making a 1% move down. So instead, I thought I'd focus in on what's going on with your favorite, Nat Gas, because Natty is down 4% today. And quite frankly, folks, I think they're exactly wrong pushing this one to the downside. And they're creating a great buying opportunity, because in my mind, I think we're going to be a lot closer to 3 and 320, Pete, in the coming months than we are to 250. Right now, today, we're at 265.
Which is shocking. I'm right there with you, John, and I would expect it to be right now even closer to 3. But maybe as we push through the rest of the year and we start seeing demands and everything else, I think maybe we'll start to see some of that start to rise up again. I'm going to hit the volatility index. I know that we talk about it all the time. I've been talking about it probably too much of late, but I don't think there is such a thing, actually. So that's why I wanted to point out the 52-week, you're looking at a low somewhere in the 11s and a high of 23. So where were we today? Last I looked, underneath 13. We've been above 13, below 13, somewhere very close to that. But when you have the last 2 months and the ranges in the upper 11s to the middle 13s, I would say we're in a fairly tight range nonetheless. And I'm a little bit shocked by it, John, but I think that adds to the opportunities that we've been talking about and a lot of the unusual option activity that you and I are going to talk about when we go through some of these market ticks.
Yeah, well, Pete, we hit 1355 on June 20th for the VIX. Then we went 1378, 1388, 1352, 1324. Today in the high 12s, 1286 or so. I think that's way too cheap. Into the debates and into the PCE. We'll see. but that's where my money would be, Pete, on buying volatility-related products. All right, let's talk about Rivian. Folks, Rivian gets thrown a lifeline, and we had very heavy buying of calls in this one. Pete and I always refer to that as unusual option activity. Volkswagen is going to invest $5 billion, $1 billion up front, Pete, and another $4 billion basically to really solidify their position, Volkswagen's position, that is, because they're one of the leaders, quite frankly, right now, Pete, in EVs behind Tesla. As far as, internationally and so forth, it's Tesla and these guys and Boyd. And this is a big move by VW, and I think it's going to pay off for them. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so as well. I think VW has made a very nice move. Obviously, Rivian's had its ups and downs, and mostly downs, honestly. But the next generation software is what they're going after. This partnership could be something that could be really good. There is a huge short interest in Rivian, which is, I think, helping it get to the levels that it's gotten to today. They had 3 times normal volume, John, in the first 30 minutes of the day. Their cash to debt is very solid. It's nearly $3 billion, but they do have that free cash flow that it is not a cash flow. It's flowing out. So it's a cash burn. But that is one of the problems. Well, that gets solved pretty quickly with VW. So this really could be a really interesting marriage here, or partnership rather, here. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how long it takes. VW, I think, has a lot of what they need, what Rivian probably needs. So this could be something that really is building something to compete with Tesla and some of the rest of them.
Well, 160 million shares changing hands tells you an awful lot, because this one is normally, I think, Pete, like 30, did you say, or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
So, yeah, this is big. And by the way, folks, the calls that they were buying, those calls were 40 cents. They went over $2 today. So if you want to get some trades like that, trades where you're getting damn near 7 to 1, so a 700% return, go to marketrebellion.com and check out what we've got there. But we've got more.
Yes, we do.
As our friend Grant Cardone might say, Pete, there's more. FedEx is also exploding to the upside. So they beat, they basically came in buying calls at $2.65, Pete. They ran those calls significantly higher because the stock traded up over 300. So the right to buy it at $2.75 when it's at 300 is worth $25, not $2.63. So bang, that's what I'm talking about. That's another 6x, 600%. So you could potentially, I guess, listen to people on TV talking about how, well, the yield on this stock is 3.5%, yield on that one's 5%, and so forth. We're talking 500%, 600%. Totally different ball game. That's why Warren Buffett, Michael Dell, Mark Cuban, all of these folks trade options, and you should too. But you need to learn about them before you do it, right, Pete?
Absolutely. I mean, the educational process does not take terribly long, but it takes a little bit of time to get understanding of what's going on and all the rest of it, all the different Greeks. But it becomes something that's very important. And as you just pointed out, in 2 so far of our 2 first stocks, it can pay off pretty well. A lot better than the guys that you and I used to sit next to who go, wow, that stock's up 5% today. I'm killing it. I'm like, 5%? We don't wake up for 5%. Anyway, earnings, they crushed it. Revenue was strong. The free cash flow, unbelievable. Repurchase, $2.5 billion. That seems pretty good. FedEx basically checked every single box that you would want, John. And the last one being the most important one, which is, how was the outlook? The outlook was damn good. So that's why this stock is hitting those 52-week highs. It's been kind of just not going anywhere for a long time. But now we're seeing some really, really nice moves in an economy that's maybe still kind of teetering around a little bit. It shows us that FedEx is doing things the right way. They've been able to improve a lot of the different areas in which they were struggling. And certainly when we look at a stock that's hitting those 52-week highs, that says a lot. As a matter of fact, it's not too far, John, from all-time highs. So nice that it's up for the year, but it's really incredible how close it is to all-time highs, because that says a lot about what they're doing now and how they're doing it right at FedEx.
Exactly right. And it's nice that between Jared sharing all these great charts with you guys and Pete and I describing how a 40-cent investment could go to $4 or $6 or whatever, and how a $2.63 investment goes to 14, 15 bucks. Those are why you trade options, my friends. All right, Whirlpool, Pete. So let's talk about Whirlpool. They did have a bit of unusual activity in this one as well, but it didn't overcome the open interest on that particular day. But if you look at the chart, or you look at this, you see those two arrows on June 12th, most recently, June 12th, traded 3.4 million shares. It averages 1.3. So we're talking about 3 times normal volume. You think somebody that knew about this Bosch deal coming in, perhaps, still not with certainty, but very strong possibility that Bosch is making a run at them. I guarantee the people that bought those calls are cashing out, Pete, cha-ching, because that's what you do when you get that opportunity. And you have to have that discipline, right, Pete?
Absolutely. We talk about discipline all the time, and it starts at the beginning of the day and ends at the end of the day, and you have to be disciplined throughout the day. And it's why we preach about that, because that actually, does move over into your business life. And that's what we're talking about here, talking about money and people investing and everything else. And sometimes those options really can be incredibly telling. But with Whirlpool, with Bosch, this is pretty interesting, John. And you were talking about this just before we came on. We were talking about, man, if Bosch is able to get this to happen, and we're talking about a market cap right now, Whirlpool, north of $5 billion. So this is a pretty decent sized deal if it were to happen. It really turns Bosch into the lone wolf, right? I mean, they will own it. And that could be something really incredible. But it's interesting because Whirlpool has been a bit of an underperformer. When you really look at where they've been 52 weeks, John, at call it $100, they're somewhere between 84 and 160 over the last year. So this is a stock that if they're able to do something down here, they might be getting Whirlpool at a pretty damn good deal. So It would be interesting. And if you're Bosch and you're able to get this thing for somewhere close to maybe that $100 level, maybe they have to pay even a little bit more, depending on what premiums look like and the debt and everything else. I think it really could be a very, very interesting takeover candidate. And it makes sense for Bosch. There's no doubt about that. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it sure does make sense. And I think that's why we're seeing so much activity and so many people talking about that Bosch is kind of kicking the tires, so to speak, right now.
Yeah. And I guarantee you, loose lips sink ships. And somebody had some loose lips in this one. I'm not accusing, but I'm saying it certainly has all the earmarks of somebody trading on tomorrow's newspaper today. Yeah. All right. General Mills, Pete, right up there in Minneapolis, where you are right now, one of the biggest companies in Minnesota, and it's falling today because instead of the sort of bullish outlook and so forth and great numbers that FedEx put up, these guys are looking at a decrease in organic net sales, Pete. And General Mills, which is Betty Crocker, Cheerios, and a host of other things, is moving to the downside pretty fast, right?
It's getting hit. It's getting hit for all the right reasons. I mean, you can't be sliding the way they are, John, and that's you're exactly right. You talked about those organic net sales being down 6%. That's going to crush somebody like General Mills, and that's exactly. I mean, I think that chart that Jared's putting up there just reflects exactly the problems right now for General Mills. But they have a few things that they're doing okay, John. They repurchased up to $2 billion worth of their stock of late. That's been something that a lot of companies have been doing. I don't think that they had announced any, if they did, I missed it, but I don't think they've announced anything new to that. But the gross margins were also pretty solid. So not everything was awful, but you just can't slide the way they are. And that's exactly what's happening right now. And if those sales are slipping the way they are at 6%, and you can't really show anything is going to change over the next couple of quarters, I think that's a bit of a problem. That's why the stock is really just sort of very close to those 52-week lows. It's about $3.50 away from there, but nonetheless, at 63, call it, and you're looking at 52-week lows around 60. This is not looking too good right now for General Mills.
Yeah, unfortunately. And one of the things they said was, Pete, continued uncertainty is the backdrop for consumers across their markets. So that is not a good thing, but it is what Pete and I have been unfortunately having to share with you folks, because instead of just reporting the news as they should, too many outlets are trying to cheerlead Biden's Build Back Better. And I think a lot of us just aren't feeling it, aren't seeing it, Pete. And you can say, oh, you're waving the right-wing flag there then, Jon, but I'm just spewing the truth here, folks. It is not as good. Certain businesses, yeah, they're doing really well, like FedEx, for instance, like AI. But when you look at General Mills and when you look at a lot of the retailers with what they've reported, the consumer is not very confident right now. They're very uncertain. That's, I think, the fairest way to put it, Pete.
Yep.
All right.
I would say that's right.
Well, let's take a look at an interesting sports clip. It's not as long as our usual ones, but it's interesting because, again, Vinny Viola, friend of ours that owns the Florida Panthers. He also owns Virtu, which is one of the largest high-frequency firms on earth, and it's publicly traded. So you could have a piece of it too, folks. I don't think he's giving you a piece of the Panthers, but the Panthers are going to give this guy a little something out of this Lord Stanley's Cup. Let's roll the tape.
What the hell? They call that drinking out of a fire hose a lot of the time, right?
Yeah. And I saw other videos, Pete, of the Panther players taking the Stanley Cup into the ocean, right off of South Beach and things. They just went running in, carrying the cup and everything. That's one of the cool things that hockey does.
Yeah.
Football, baseball, they don't get to do that. They do get to have the trophy. And knock on wood, Pete, I got to get my picture taken with the World Series trophy, once with the Sox and once with the Cubs, because they brought it to the floor of the Chicago Board Option Exchange. It was called back then. Now it's SIBO Global Markets. But it's pretty cool that they walk around with these trophies, but nobody does it like the NHL, because the players get the cup. Every player who is on the roster gets that cup for a day. And some of them choose then to use that day way overseas or whatever. But these guys haven't even slept, Pete. Since they won the Stanley Cup, they've just been partying with their fans down in Florida. And it's pretty cool to see, the relationship. Not that I'm dancing on the Edmonton Oilers' grave, and, McDavid's still one of the best there is. But that was a great series, and you can see them letting off some steam right here.
Having a lot of fun. And like you said, the players get to have it for a day. And it's a really cool experience, Jon, because obviously Minnesota being the state of hockey outside of professionally, professionally we are not. We have to concede to Florida. They got Tampa, they got Florida. We've got no Stanley Cups here in Minnesota ever. But we do have a lot of great hockey, men and women, from every level all the way up until you get to the pros. Then we have a major issue. But it is cool because a lot of kids that actually get into the NHL have been on teams that have won the cup, and they bring it back here. There's a guy from White Bear a couple of years ago, a guy from Stillwater around the corner from me a couple of years ago as well. So it is pretty cool, and it's great to be in the backyard. I've been lucky enough to be in one of those recently. So a couple of years ago when St. Louis had won one. So it's kind of fun. It really is. It's something special. All right, Jon, let's jump into the sports, though. So number one, the NBA draft. Are you pretty thrilled about this? And I'll tell you why you're not, because I'm already going to answer the The NFL draft is something special, right? I mean, there is something so cool about that. But the problem sometimes, I think, with the NBA and the NHL is name recognition. People don't know who these guys are. And the problem is this. Here's my example. It's not that we don't have some great college players going into the NBA draft. But we've got, right now we've got a guy, Reisiker from France. We've got Sar from Australia. We've got Topic from Serbia. We got another guy from France. And these guys are all somewhere in the top 10, John, of estimated draft picks this year. So who cares is right. I mean, when you look at it, I'll give you another one. How about this? Last year, they had 4.9 million viewers in the first round of the NBA draft, right? Sounds like a big number. It's an okay number, but the NFL draft averaged 12 million. So a little bit different, I would say. And I think a lot of that has to do with name recognition. People want to know who the hell these guys are. And when you're getting guys from Serbia that nobody's ever heard of, or maybe even, you're getting some college guys. But this year's class, I'm telling you, John, it might be the worst class in a long time. Not for major reasons, but nobody's really excited. Nobody's talking about, geez, we might have to trade the world to try to get up to number 2 because this guy's that good. They just aren't this year. It's not the same as it's been in the past, but it's again, I think, a name recognition problem, both in hockey and in basketball compared to football, where we know who the first 5-6 guys are going to be, and there's going to be trades to get them like we did this last year with all those quarterbacks. So I don't know if there's a fix, John, but that's what I see with the NBA, and I can tell you, I don't know how they could fix it because, let's be honest, a lot of these European players and players from the rest of the world are pretty damn good. We saw it in the playoffs itself, right?
Yeah, we're about to see it, Pete, in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Because Puerto Rico, great players. Brazil, great players. Like you already said, Serbia, Croatia, great players. China's got some guys that are 7'3" and 7'6" and things like that. I don't know if they're great players, but they're big shot blockers. But yeah, and it is an international game, more so than football, a lot more like hockey, because hockey is truly, as Pete said, a lot of hockey players that come out of Minnesota play for teams other than the Wild, which is the Minnesota professional hockey team in the NHL, but they play on every team in the NHL, and they're great players. And the same thing is said, Pete, of players, again, just like basketball, Croatia, yeah. Mm-hmm. Serbia, yeah. Russia, yeah. Sweden, Finland, Norway, yeah. So there's a lot of great players around the world. Those are more international games than football, and I think that helps the ratings, Pete, because the people know them. They know those players from Connecticut that won the title this year, but those guys might not be the top players picked in the draft at all. I don't know for sure, but I don't know that those guys are going to be ahead of those foreigners that we just talked about, Pete.
Yeah, I think the big center from UConn probably, and a lot of people are very high on Reed Shepherd, a kid out of Kentucky who's a heck of a shooter. So, but after that, it kind of drops off. All right, John, going back to the NFL, because you know what? There's nothing quite like the NFL, and you and I both played on it, enjoyed it, loved everything about it. By the way, training camp is not that far away, my friend. July 13th is the first one, I believe, and that's the Baltimore Ravens are going to be starting their camp for the rookies, and then the veterans come in afterwards. But it's always pretty cool. It's always exciting. But I had this for you. There's a lot of quarterback battles that are going to be going on. And I think that there's one that stands out for me, and you and I will have to kick it around. Well, there's a couple, actually. Russell Wilson and your old Chicago Bears, Justin Fields at Pittsburgh Steelers. That could be pretty damn interesting because everybody just figures, well, Russell. I'm still on the bandwagon of Justin. I think that guy's got athleticism. I don't think they used him the proper way. And when they did, you guys were a damn good football team, I thought. And he's a great athlete. I think they might have given up on him a little bit early. But then you've got, how about this guy, Jarrett Stidham? Now, he's an Auburn quarterback. He's been everywhere. Go to the Broncos. And you know who else is at the Broncos? Bo Nix. So you've got a quarterback you just grabbed. You've got Jarrett Nason. Oh, and by the way, you got Zach Wilson. Those are your quarterbacks. Here's an interesting stat as you want to roll this one around, John. So Zach Wilson's 24 years old. You know how old Bo Nix is? 24 years old. The difference is Zach Wilson's already played 4 years in the NFL for the Jets. Yeah. And now you're getting Bo Nix, who has not played a down in the NFL yet. So that's an interesting one too. And I think the world of Bo Nix. I think he's actually going to be the guy who stands up and is the quarterback fairly early, but we'll see. But you got a bunch of them. You got Gardner Minshew and O'Connell at the Raiders. You got J.J. McCarthy and Sam Donald at the Vikings. You got Drake May and Jacoby Brissett at New England. There's a lot of them. What's your favorite battle? Do you got one that you look at and say, you know what?
Justin Fields, of course.
Yeah.
And I agree with Pete 100%, folks. I hope Caleb Williams works out for the Bears. He's certainly a talented kid, and so was Fields. So we'll see. But I agree with Pete's assessment. I don't think the Bears gave him the proper team around him. I don't think the coaching for his position was that great. And Justin's going to get just the opposite. He's going to have a team built around him, and he's going to have better coaching, we think. And I hope Caleb Williams does fabulous with that. But Justin, I would say he's probably got, not in a bad way, Pete, but in a good way, a chip on his shoulder. Yeah. He wants to prove something in Pittsburgh. And I'm sure Mike Tomlin wants him to prove something in Pittsburgh, too. By the way, folks, we're back, of course, tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So stay tuned for that tomorrow. Also, I'll be on with, let's see, I'm going to be on, Pete, the Big Money Show with Jackie DeAngelis, Brian Brenberg, and Taylor Riggs today over at the Fox Business Channel. So if you get a chance, tune into that. And I hope all of you have a great afternoon. Bang.